Hey everybody, I'm Zach.
And I'm Jesse.
And you're watching In Depth on Now You Know.
This episode is sponsored by Keeps.
Look guys, 2 out of 3 of us will experience some form of male pattern baldness by the time we're 35. That's about when it started happening to me.
Keeps is a subscription service that makes it easier and more affordable for men to treat their male pattern baldness online.
The best way to prevent hair loss is to do something about it while you still have your hair left.
With Keeps, a licensed doctor will review your information online and recommend the right hair loss treatment plan for you.
Then your treatment is shipped right to your door every 3 months so you don't have to think about it.
Keeps offers generic versions of the FDA-approved medications for hair loss, which makes it more affordable.
Find out why Keeps has more 5-star reviews than any of its competitors and why hundreds of thousands of men trust Keeps for their hair loss prevention.
If you're ready to take action and prevent hair loss, go to keeps.com/nowyouknow or click at the link in the description to receive 50% off your first order.
That's keeps.com/nowyouknow.
And we're brought to you by abetterrootplanner.com. Use our link in the show notes below to get a 30-day free trial to the premium app.
We're brought to you by BigBattery.com. No matter what you need to power, Big Battery can provide you with the latest battery tech at the best price per kilowatt hour, guaranteed. Their batteries are easily installed, require zero maintenance, and they're made right here in the U.S. Pick up yours today at BigBattery.com and use code NOWYOUKNOW for 5% off at checkout.
And we're brought to you by ecoware.us. Start positive conversations with carbon-negative products. We carbon offset the manufacturing, the shipping, and the life cycle of your purchase. And we plant 10 trees for your order, which makes it extremely carbon negative. We also help cap wells with the Well Done Foundation.
Go check out our latest designs and help support the channel. Okay, quiet down, everyone. I know many of you saw the clickbait thumbnail, and you're here to get us.
How could Zach and I be telling people not to buy an EV? That's like our whole thing.
Right. Well, hang on. We have a good reason to say this, and let us explain.
First of all, we're only talking about people living in the United States. Everyone else in the world, please keep buying EVs.
But folks, if you live in the US and you're thinking about buying an EV, we think it might be in your best interest to wait and hear us out first.
Okay, so we're talking about the federal EV incentive program, which is part of the huge $3.5 trillion spending bill before Congress right now.
So let us explain what the House's version of the EV incentive program is. So as part of the House's Ways and Means Committee spending package, they have approved an updated EV incentive program. And we're going to lay it out for you because it's a little complicated, but it's got a lot of good provisions in it. So first of all, as we know right now, if you go to buy a Tesla, you can't get the $7,500 tax credit anymore because they're above their 200,000 vehicle manufacturer limit cap.
This also applies to GM, which went over their limit quite a while ago, so you don't get any federal incentive for buying, say, a Bolt. But other companies still have their incentives, but they are approaching that 200,000 vehicle limit, and once they do, that credit is going to slowly go away.
And this makes the whole incentive program really complicated because you have to become like an expert in the program to know which vehicles have which federal incentives, and then there's time limits and like, oh no, I better rush. And I mean, I understand why they did it, but it was made it hard for everyone. So this new bill would remove the 200,000 vehicle per manufacturer cap, which is great. That means you can make and sell as many EVs as you want. And
this would mean that for the first time in a couple of years, you'd be able to buy a Tesla or a GM with the incentive, which is awesome.
This incentive program would keep the $7,500 incentive for new electric cars for the next 5 years.
This would also change the $7,500 incentive to a point of sale discount instead of a tax credit.
That is a huge point, and I think what stopped a lot of people from even being excited about the incentive before was a tax credit. And you can kind of speak to that.
Yeah, so when I went to go buy my Tesla, I lucked out. I got it in the last quarter that I could get the $7,500 tax credit. I was so excited, and I bought my car. I put down a lot of money on it, and then I waited and waited, and I didn't get the $7,500 tax credit because it was going to come in my tax return, which was some months later. And on top of that, I didn't exactly know how to get my tax credit.
Right. I mean, first of all, you have to file the right paperwork, which you've never done before.
Right.
Secondly, I want to point out, you're on a tight budget. When you were talking to me about buying the car, you're like, when does the $7,500 come into play? Because I have to put down this down payment. I have to make these payments for months.
Right.
When am I getting my money?
If I could have, at the point of sale, had that $7,500 credit, that would have meant that I could have put more down on the car.
Or had a smaller loan.
Exactly. I could have saved and been saving like probably $100 a month just if that incentive had come in at the right time. but I wasn't able to do that, and it was a big bummer. Also, when I'm filing my taxes and it's, you're on Quicken or whatever, and it's just like, all right, enter your W-4. It was like, okay, looks like you're all set. And then I had to go Google, how do I get my federal tax credit? And it was like, oh, well, you need form 1073B. And you could find it okay. And I had to then go delve into the paperwork that Tesla had nicely given me in a nice little folder. And luckily I had kept. But if I had missed any of those steps, I would have missed out on $7,500 tax credit.
Also, if you didn't earn the right income, you wouldn't have gotten all the tax credit. A lot of people are complaining that you have to be wealthy enough to earn the tax credit in the first place.
Right. It was just so complicated and stressful. And if I wasn't as committed as I was to buying the car, I probably would have just given up because it was so much work just to get this credit, which I wouldn't get immediately, which meant that for 6 months, I was living oh, I regret buying my car because I don't have any more money.
Right. So this change would make it so that right at the point of sale, so either at the dealership or right when you're checking out online, the $7,500 would come off the price. That's huge.
Humongous. The next change would be that EVs with battery packs smaller than 40 kilowatt hours are limited to a $4,000 incentive.
Okay, so for most of you watching who don't keep track of battery sizes, you might be like, what does that mean? Most EVs today in the US for sale have a larger than 40 kilowatt hour battery pack. So this doesn't really apply to most, except maybe what?
There's the i3, which is 33 kilowatt hours. There's the new Mini Cooper SE, which has a tiny range and a tiny battery pack. The Mazda MX-30. There's a couple of just they're late compliance cars. Anyway, those cars wouldn't be getting the full credit, but they would still be getting $4,000 off. And cars with smaller battery packs are typically cheaper, so it would be helpful.
So you might be wondering about the 40 kilowatt hour battery pack, and you might be like, as we just said, there's not a lot of BEVs with a 40 kilowatt hour battery pack or smaller, but there are a lot of PHEVs or plug-in hybrid electric vehicles with a small battery, and that's what this is addressing, is they don't want to give a big credit for plug-ins because those are using gas power primarily.
Now, is this the end of the world, like some people are saying, that the added union incentive would allow someone to get $9,000 off a PHEV while they could only get $8,000 off a Tesla or other non-union BEV?
I don't think so, just because I don't think PHEVs are that compelling. Kind of makes you wonder why GM didn't just keep making the Volt, huh?
It definitely isn't perfect, and again, compromises have to be made in a democracy, and this is one of the compromises that I think I would definitely be willing to take. I have not seen a lot of plug-in hybrids waiting in the wings, ready to be produced. Maybe this is going to create a glut of them. I don't know, but I just think that this isn't really the problem, because like you're saying, they're not very compelling vehicles when on the same lot there's a fully electric vehicle. A 100% battery electric vehicle will always have more torque because it has more power available to it.
Yeah, I mean, if Tesla weren't part of this picture, then yes, I think that would be a problem, because the ICE manufacturers would have a bunch of PHEVs to show off, and there wouldn't be much to compete with them, because let's face it, a PHEV versus, say, a Bolt is not the same as a PHEV versus a Model Y. All right, next in the EV incentive program, an additional $4,500 off, so add that to the $7,500 for EVs assembled at union factories.
Now, this is the really big contentious point that is kind of controversial.
Yeah, so the unions lobbied hard to the Democrats to get this put into it, because this gives a huge incentive for union-made cars. And I'm not going to say I'm against it, because I want EVs to have an incentive, but it is unfair to, let's say, Tesla, which is a non-union company. So if you buy a Tesla, you don't get the extra $4,500? Kind of unfair, but look, at this point, I'm so happy to get any EV incentive that let's just leave it in there.
And for people who are going to buy union cars, that's great. It is weird that you are penalizing the American workers of American car companies for not unionizing a federal incentive that you're not going to give them.
Right. These are workers that are so happy at the company they're working at, like Tesla, which is not unionized, meaning the workers did not vote to unionize because they're so happy, that because they're happy, you're penalizing them.
And there have been anti-union pushes at Tesla, coming from Tesla corporate to try and squash unions. That's like a typical thing that happens at any company. But I mean, the majority of Tesla employees haven't gone for that. And for people who say, well, Tesla employees get low wages, they also get stock options, which if you use wisely, you'd make way more than your union counterpart could.
Right. I mean, because who wouldn't want to be a Tesla stock owner right now? All right. This incentive plan also adds another $500 for EVs that are using battery packs with 50% of the components, including the cells, made in the U.S. So that would include Teslas.
Now, when the bill was first proposed, this section was going to have more and the union section was going to have less. So it's kind of disappointing that this has gone smaller. Again, I will take this as a compromise if we could get this bill passed, because it's still a good bill even with this in it.
Now, this next piece of the EV incentive program is actually pretty cool. After the first 5 years, the $7,500 becomes only for U.S.-made electric vehicles, and it applies for another 5 years. So to put this into English, Tesla vehicles would get the $7,500 for the next 10 years.
And this would also be true of pretty much any other car company that had manufacturing in the U.S.
So the VW ID4, which is made in Chattanooga, Tennessee, that would count, but it wouldn't count, I think, vehicles made in, say, Mexico or Canada.
Which would be like the Mach-E, which is made in Mexico.
Correct.
Although there's like 5-10 years where GM could move the production somewhere else,
right,
with that incentive in mind.
Now, there are price limits on the EVs that are eligible for the incentives. Sedans would have to cost under $55,000. SUVs would have to cost under $69,000. Pickup trucks would have to cost under $74,000, and vans would have to cost under $54,000. These are pretty good numbers. A lot of EVs fall into these price categories.
Especially the more affordable, less glitzy, glamorous versions of them. So like this wouldn't include the performance Model 3, but it would include the long-range Model 3, which is a nice trade-off because the long-range Model 3, some people need more range. The performance, does anyone need to go 0 to 60 in like 3 seconds? No, not really.
Right. And the Model S and the X wouldn't fall under this at all.
And I like that this is broken up into different car segments because your pickup trucks typically cost more than your tiny sedan. And this reflects that. It also gives the incentive to pickup truck buyers, which I think is a good segment to be focused on when we're talking about EVs.
And lastly, under the EV incentive program, they're also introducing caps on income to get access to the incentives, but they are fairly high. So if you're an individual with an adjusted gross income of up to $400,000, you would qualify, and joint filers with $800,000 would qualify. So that's pretty much everybody.
Yeah, this excludes the multimillionaires, but for people who are just doing well for themselves, it doesn't just arbitrarily exclude them, which I think is fair.
Now, a few weeks ago, we reported on Tesla Time News that the Senate had passed a non-binding resolution by a slim margin of their version of the EV incentive.
Senator Debbie Fisher of Nebraska proposed prohibiting Americans who earned more than $100,000 a year from claiming any EV tax credits and putting a $40,000 limit on the price of an EV to qualify, reducing the number of EVs that would qualify to the base models of 10 EVs out of nearly 60 electric models available in the U.S.
Okay, so there's two pieces then, right? So anyone earning over $100,000 would not qualify. I get what she was driving at. She was like, if you're rich, you shouldn't get this credit. But there's a lot of people who earn $100,000 a year or more who are into this early adopter mode of EVs, and I don't think it's fair to disqualify them just because they're doing fairly well.
Exactly. We don't want to be disincentivizing people from buying EVs.
Right. And then secondly, this $40,000 limit, I mean, let's be honest here. There really aren't many choices available at the moment for $40,000 or less.
And I just want to point out that of the 10 EVs that qualify for the credit, 4 of them would not be able to get the full credit because their batteries are so small. So this is a tiny little subset of cars that would get it. Also, it would put a range cap on people getting the tax credit of 262 miles for, of course, the Model 3 Standard Range Plus, which has the best range of cars that cost under $40,000. But the average range of vehicles would be under 190 miles, which time has shown to be a non-starter. People will not buy an EV if it's less than 200 miles of range.
So look, I've been around for a few decades and I've followed plenty of bills traveling through Congress, but I don't claim to understand all the intricacies of this $3.5 trillion spending package because it's thousands of pages of text, which must contain tons of side deals, scratch your back provisions, and horse trading. But in a nutshell, this is what I think could happen. The House Ways and Means Committee is the House's most powerful committee. I think that the unions got what they wanted. This EV incentive program gives a huge lopsided incentive to buy union-made EVs. They lobbied Democrats hard to include the extra $4,500 for union-made EVs, and now that the House Ways and Means Committee passed it out of committee, that means we are very close to the final wording of this EV incentive program. But we have the Senate to contend with. And don't forget that the Senate only has a wafer-thin Democratic majority.
The fossil fuel lobbyists have been working hard to water down this EV incentive language. And as we've seen with Senator Debbie Fischer's non-binding resolution, the Senate would rather hack this incentive program down to nothing.
And let's be honest, her non-binding resolution would effectively make this EV incentive nothing.
Pretty worthless, in my opinion.
So what does this mean?
I wouldn't be surprised if late one night, in some back room or hallway of Congress, a deal is made between just a few Congress people and senators that modifies the language of the House's EV incentive program just ever so slightly and essentially guts it.
Guts it? How?
All you have to do to gut the EV incentive program is change 3 digits.
3 digits?
The current language says sedans under $55,000, SUVs under $69,000, and pickup trucks under $74,000.
Okay.
All they have to do is change that first 5 in the sedans to a 3 or a 4, and that guts it. Change the 6 in SUV to a 4 or 5, and that guts it. And the 7 under pickup trucks to a 5 or a 6, and that guts it.
Wait, how's it gut it?
Because that would mean that the tax credit wouldn't apply to anything.
Yeah, then it would just be like Senator Debbie Fischer's amendment where the limits are so low that you can't find any cars to buy.
Exactly. And that would be useless. That doesn't push the industry forward. It doesn't help anybody because the credit wouldn't apply to any cars that you could buy.
Yeah, I think that this shows that the lobbyists who were working on this EV incentive were working with Ford and the unions. And I mean, even Elon pointed that out in his tweet. It's so obvious now because Ford has a pickup truck they're talking about, an electric pickup truck, the Ford F-150 Lightning, and that is going to be priced between $39,000 and $90,000. And that means that most of the variants are under the limit of $74,000.
Right. The XLT is going to be $53,000.
I think Ford and the UAW sat down with their chosen congresspeople and said, let's write up the bill that really helps us out.
And so getting $12,000 off of that $53,000 price tag really helps a lot.
Yeah, that's a $41,000 pickup truck, which now means it's really competitive with the Cybertruck.
Which is great. I want you to be able to afford an electric pickup truck because I would rather you get a extra incentive to buy a union-made pickup truck from Ford than drive a union-made pickup truck from Ford that wasn't electric.
So here's the thing. First up, we need you. Yes, you watching. If you're living in the US, then don't get up. You can stay on your couch for this.
Just take out your phone, open up your favorite social media app, and post that you want to keep the House's version of the EV incentive program.
Yeah, post something at your congressperson or at your senator and say something like, if you change the wording, I'm going to remember you at election time.
Your senators and congresspeople have bigger fish to fry with this $3.5 trillion spending bill. There is a lot more lobbying going on for this bill, and that's good for us.
Yeah, your elected official is not going to die on this EV hill.
If enough of us make it clear that we want EV incentives, they will leave it alone.
But make no mistake, the horse trading is going on as we speak. We don't have much time, and we need this federal EV incentive program. It is going to make a huge difference for EV adoption here in the U.S.
If you want to help Elon and Tesla with their mission to speed up the adoption of clean, sustainable transportation, this EV incentive program is very important.
And here's why. As you lower the price of an automobile by just $5,000, you double the number of people who can afford it.
This EV incentive, even on the low end, will more than double the number of Americans who can afford an EV. And on the high end, it's going to 4x, 8x that number.
Wait a minute, 4 or 8x that number?
At the top end of $12,500, we're talking 4 to close to 8 times the number of people
right, because math, right? So 5,000 doubles it. If you double that number again, that's 4x the number of people. And this is actually more than $10,000. So it's more than 4x. It's probably, like you said, 6x or 8x. So that means, I mean, if you're looking at a crowd of people who can afford the car, you're now just making that a huge number of people who can afford EVs. And if we're already doing this well selling EVs already, I mean, like Tesla is selling out, then we're just adding a huge number to the pool of people who can afford it.
And people are waiting. Smart folks who are in our little EV bubble know about these federal incentives, and many of them are waiting to see what becomes law before they purchase their next car.
What's really going to make a huge difference is they're not going to have to worry like you did about filling out tax forms later. They're just going to get the incentive right there when they check out.
And that is going to make EV buying so much less stressful for the consumer. It's going to make the math so much easier to compute. You no longer need to factor in when you're buying the car and when you're going to be filing taxes and when you're going to get the return. And are things going to be delayed because of COVID? You don't have to worry about any of that. It's just you're going to go to the dealership, you're going to look at the car, you're going to go, I want to buy that car. And they're going to go, great, we're going to put the $7,500 tax credit right on there. Boom. You are saving money as you leave the dealership. You're probably leaving with a smaller loan than you thought you would have. It is going to rock.
Now, you might be afraid to tweet something out because you're afraid some of the people in your friend group are going to be like, wait a minute, we're opposed to government subsidies.
Taxpayer money going to support the EV industry.
Well, hang on. Don't forget, the U.S. government subsidizes all sorts of industries like fossil fuels, milk, ethanol, etc., and it has for decades.
Giving an EV incentive, especially one that has a US-made bias, helps create more US jobs and especially helps compete with China, which is going heavily into EVs and could easily outcompete the US.
Yeah, if you think China is going to stand by and not import their EVs into the US, you got another thing coming. So if in a few years we don't do something here in the US to build up our US manufacturing of EVs, then we're just going to be overrun with Chinese EVs.
And geopolitics aside, to me, the biggest benefit is that we are cleaning up our environment.
I mean, we're reducing our CO2 emissions.
And even if you don't care about that, there's nitrous oxide and PM 2.5 particles that you aren't spewing out of your tailpipe into the face of other motorists.
Yeah, and we talk about this all the time. I mean, that means we're reducing our healthcare costs and we're improving IQs of children and we're improving the quality of life for all Americans and basically all people who live on the planet.
And in my opinion, that's the job of government, to set policies that influence how people live for the better of society.
Now, if the U.S. government would like to remove all subsidies, well, heck, I'd be in favor of that too, because if EVs could compete on a truly level playing field, then EVs would have won a long time ago.
And if you're worried about like the costs of this EV incentive package sounds expensive, let's not forget how expensive the impacts of climate change are going to be.
Yeah, lowering CO2, let's not forget, is to help with runaway climate change. Events like the most recent Hurricane Ida here on the East Coast, which slammed into New York and caused $95 billion worth of damage. Forget the cost in human lives. If you want to make a purely economic argument, an EV incentive is a cheap and effective government policy.
Think about it. We don't need to hire more government employees. We don't need to build more government buildings. We're just helping private industry to make products that are better for the planet.
I mean, what could be more libertarian than that? You're not creating a new department of EVs. You're technologying your way out of the problem, which is what I hear conservatives say all the time. Don't worry, private industry will fix it. I think the great news is that we're at the tipping point. If this EV incentive law looks like the House Ways and Means Committee bill, then we are about to tip the scales to favor EVs once and for all in this country.
I believe this will be the final nail in the coffin for ICE vehicles.
U.S. car buyers going forward will not be able to resist, at least strongly considering an EV in their car buying equation.
Not only were EVs already getting cheaper,
not only was EV infrastructure getting better,
but now EVs are getting a huge discount.
It's game over for ICE.
If you act now.
This is where you guys come in. You should write letters. You should make phone calls. You should write emails to your elected officials.
And we'll put a couple links down below to where you can find your elected officials' email addresses and phone numbers.
Because we have heard directly from elected officials that this makes a huge impact on them when they hear directly from you. But I want to stress this. You have a huge multiplier effect available to you. So after you're done writing your letter to your elected officials, take a sentence or two out of that letter, put it on your social media, and say to the rest of your friends and family, this is what I just did. I urge you to do it too.
Because if you can convince just one extra person to send one extra email, you have essentially doubled your impact.
Yeah, so imagine you write that letter to your elected official. That's great. But like Jesse said, if you post it to your social media and just one person reads it, that's doubling your impact. But wait a minute. What if more than one person follows your lead? You could be tripling, quadrupling, 10xing your impact.
And then if just one of those people posts to their social media and they get 2 or 3 other people to write to their congresspeople. You are exponentially increasing your impact. And if you don't like Facebook or you don't like Twitter, you don't have to post it on there, but post it somewhere, or call up your friend or call up your mother and talk to them about this bill and how it would make such a big difference.
Because we're at a point in history that is actually, we think, the tipping point. And your actions today are going to have a huge impact on whether we move forward or whether we take a step back. Because make no mistake, if the Senate gets their way, they're going to water down this bill so that it is meaningless. They'll be able to call it an EV incentive. We passed an EV incentive, but it will have nothing in it. And if it has nothing in it, no one will use it. And then EVs will not be on a level playing field with ICE cars.
It, in fact, could set up an even worse situation than we're in now. Car companies that right now have a $7,500 incentive for some of their cars that might cost a little bit more than $40,000 for people who might earn a little bit more than $100,000 would lose their credit. And that would be even worse than doing nothing. And there is no doing nothing right now. Something is going to happen with this bill.
And make no mistake, the lobbyists are working hard behind the scenes. They are contacting the congresspeople. They are twisting arms to make sure that it happens the way they want it to play out. The only move we have left is you.
And then once the bill hopefully passes with all the good stuff in it, we can all buy some EVs with a great discount. And we can all stop waiting for all the people who've been waiting for like a year and a half of like, I want to buy my car, but I don't want to lose out on $7,500 or $12,000.
And if you're worried about posting because you're like, I don't even know how to make all the points you guys just made, you don't have to. Just post a link to this video and then they'll watch it and then they'll understand the whole issue.
So thank you so much for watching. Again, reach out to your congresspeople, hit the like button on this video. It will also help share this video with someone who, through the algorithm, might have wanted to watch it.
Yeah, 2 minutes of your time right now could make a huge difference in the future of this planet.
This is like the bottom of the ninth, 2 outs, the bases are loaded. You are coming up to bat. Are you really just going to sit there and let all the pitches fly past you? Or are you going to try and swing your bat and hit a grand slam? Please tell me that you're going to swing your bat and go out there and post and contact your representatives and let's get this thing passed.
Thanks so much for watching, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Now you know.